Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. I'm DV LeBron. Do you need things done around your house? Maybe some roofing needs, maybe just in general some remodeling. Look at K&H Construction. They do just about everything, and they are a local company, which I love to support small business locally. He has been with this community since he grew up here. So now he's doing this construction thing. Take a look, K&H, K&H. So today, my very special guest is Ms.Jacqueline Wolfhard. How are you, ma'am?
I'm doing all right. Pretty good night so far.
I wanted to have you on because I read your stuff and I was like, wow, this woman has done all kinds of stuff. And I love compelling stories on my show. I love when people come out of the tough stuff because it makes for beautiful, purposeful people. And I on my last show, I had a cancer patient he doesn't know how long he's got left, but he's living a life of purpose. And I saw what you do, and I said, this person is somebody I have to have on. So thank you so much for coming on. Can you give a quick bio to my viewers?
Ooh, I'm not sure we have enough time. Yeah. So I have a doctorates in psychology, and so that's my main job. I have an array of clientele that I work with, but my main focus is children who have been sex trafficked. Previously, I worked with special needs kids doing things like ABA therapy, which you're probably familiar with. I was the clinical supervisor of an ABA clinic. What else have I done? I have 4 children. I have 4 sons, all boys, and my oldest is autistic as well, but he was diagnosed with Asperger's, which is no longer a diagnosis in the United States, but that's how long ago he was diagnosed. Yeah, I'm a wife and a mom, and I have a media festival as well. I've made films. I used to model way back in the day, and that kind of inspired my artistic creativity. I was in music videos and things like that. So that kind of made me branch my psychology with like, what can we do entertainment wise with that? And I guess now I have the title of filmmaker as well because I have won some awards for a film I made. Yeah, I feel like probably anything that you say, "Oh, have you ever tried this?" Yeah, I probably have. I've dabbled in it all.
How do you how does your work as a trauma psychologist, how have you integrated that into this filmmaking? Because it's just fascinating that you have all these things mixed in there. So let me approach that one. How do you put those two together?
Yeah, I think it actually feels like they belong together and from my point of view. So I've written scripts and we have a series that's in development now, and so I started writing that script a way long time ago, but it got purchased during COVID. It got purchased, and so it's like still being developed at the moment. And it is a really involves like the emotional roller coasters of everybody's life, and the film that we made about a year and a half ago that's been winning awards, it is about it is a true story based on some of my clients' lives as trafficking victims, and it's filmed like a horror movie because that is a horrific topic. So I feel like when you're a psychologist, you are analyzing stories all the time and really trying to understand characters constantly. So it only makes sense that it would go hand in hand with developing a movie and how or a TV show or any of that, like how you would flow character arcs together. It just makes sense to me. So, bam, put them together. It made sense to do to me.
No, it's as a psychologist, there are many fields that you could get into. How did that come about where you started dealing with sex trafficking victims?
Yeah, that's a longer roundabout path. When I knew I was working on myself for a long time, and the best way to work on myself, I felt, was to switch my degrees to psychology. I was originally going to medical school, and I thought, you know what, I need to work on myself more. Let's do some psychology classes. And I thought addictions was the way I would be going. I thought it was a heavy need. And as I was going and learning lots of cool things, like you don't have to be using substances to be an addict. And I never really thought about it that way before. But as I was going through all that programming, all that schooling, I should say, through that program, autism was like really hitting heavy, where they were like, we need more therapists for special needs children, especially autism. So even though I got my master's was in substance use, I started working with special needs children and working on my general psychology degree. So my doctorate's degree is just in general psychology. I felt like I could probably branch into a lot that way. But in the back of my mind, my my own childhood trauma, which was I was sex trafficked as a child as well. I It was just something I felt like I could help other kids with. And I actually didn't even know that I was sex trafficked. In my brain, I hadn't connected that me being taken across country, sold to multiple people, I just took it as I was sexually abused as a child. But so my goal was to work with sexually abused children, trying to show them they can overcome these things, that we can find the light at the end of the tunnel, how figure out how those negative things impacted our brain and how we can counteract those to make our brain start working how we want it to work instead of how it's forcing us to be. And like through all my so I started doing all these continued educations for sex abuse and sex trauma and trauma therapy, things like that. And that's when I was like, oh my God, I wasn't just sexually abused. I was like trafficked. Me and I'm not the only one in my family, but we were literally being sold across country to multiple people. And I had dismissed it as this minor thing that so many people probably go through the same thing, not realizing how big and scary that it really was. And I was blessed to have a company worked for in Florida where I just happened to get hired here. I didn't even know that they worked with trafficked children. I knew they worked with trauma, but they actually get kids sent to them who have been in trouble with the law for being trafficked. You can actually get criminally punished if you are a trafficked child. Yeah, it's a messed up thing. But so they were sending me clients who were court ordered to me. And I was like, wow, this is what I wanted to do. And I didn't even know when I started working with this company, like, this is what I've always wanted to do. Now I have my own company that was in Orlando. That was Chrysalis Health in Orlando. And they are truly amazing. But I don't live in Orlando. So that was a trek. That's 4 hours of driving every day that I don't want to have to do.
Yeah.
So I found companies closer to me working with trauma, children with trauma and things like that. But I finally started my own practice about a year and a half ago. So I can start back specifically with kids who have been trafficked, but not exclusively. I have other clients as well. So
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
roundabout story.
Oh no, it's what I love about the show, because I try to make the show about my guests and their experiences. That you're a lot more interesting than I am. And I like to point out these people that have been through such adversity and are doing such great stuff. Now I want to tell you, and I know that this is I don't have a better word for it, but I'm sorry that you went through that. If I
Thank
had a
you. Yeah.
better word or something bigger, I would tell you. That's all I got, and I'm sorry that you went through that. But what do you think? What do you think has been the most helpful thing? Because a lot of people, they see sex trafficking on the news, and it's ugly, it's awful, but it's over
Mhm.
there. It's over there. It's that person. It's not me. When you're treating this, what is the most effective treatment, and what do you think people are missing the most out of seeing all these patients? What do you think people are missing the most out of this awful subject?
Yeah, so I think as not the victim, but just being a person living your life, you actually probably encounter trafficked people all the time and you don't realize it. If you go to any school, any high school right now, there is at least one kid in each grade level who is being trafficked at the moment, but chances are it's even more than one child. And that's every state. That's not just Florida, that's not limited. That's all over the United States. It is everywhere. And I think also I happen to work with sex trafficking, but people don't realize that's not the only type of trafficking that happens with humans. But I do think that when you hear the word trafficking, you instantly think sex trafficking, but there's multiple types of trafficking. So you have to really be on the lookout. You want to look for, is it a teenager who's homeless? They're probably being trafficked. A very extra timid person who maybe doesn't speak English, or the person they're with doesn't allow them to speak, they're probably being trafficked. You have to look at the world a lot more dark than you want to have to see the world. My whole job is to try to show that there can be a light at the end of the tunnel, but I have to constantly have my eyes open for that darkness. You just never know. I can go into a Walmart right now and guarantee that there's at least one person at any given time in there who is a trafficking victim. And not just sex traffic, again, that could be
Right.
any type. So labor trafficking is really huge. So with that, you're going to look for males. That is a more common, depending on the labor, but you're going to see a lot less men being sex trafficked, but they're great labor. That's how people are looking at them. Like you're nothing to me but labor. That's all you're good for. And they're so desperate to seek help, have shelter, paying for maybe their family in a different country, maybe their family here, but they can't afford it, that they're willing to sacrifice themselves into being trafficked, maybe not even realizing that they got them. Sounds like oh man, this sounds like a job opportunity I can't pass up. They take the job not realizing what it's actually leading to. And that's really common with the labor ones. Anytime you see a job that's too good to pass up, you got to be skeptical. You can't go in there alone. Let's just say come prepared and be ready to be on guard. With sex trafficking, it's teenage girls are more likely to be targeted, but that doesn't mean they're the only ones. A small child could be worth more money to somebody. Minorities are a big target. Members of the LGBTQ community, major targets for trafficking. People want to shame them and say they're so gross, but they like to keep them in their back pocket for a good time, and they will take advantage of that. Yeah, so you really have to keep your eyes open looking for, I'd say, if you're really going to keep your eye open and looking for them, look for somebody who looks like a homeless teenager, or look for minorities who seem to be quiet all the time. Those are probably the easiest signs you can look for of somebody potentially being trafficked. As a victim, things that we do, it really is going to depend on the severity of your case and what you're ready for, how we're going to handle it. I know me myself, I'm probably still dealing with stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I
Uh,
feel like I'm a pretty well put together person. I have a nice house. I feel like I'm a good mom. I have wonderful children. I had one of my sons graduated high school with a full scholarship, and he graduated 2 years early. I feel like that's a really cool
Congratulations.
accomplishment for our family. But there's days where things aren't going so well in my brain, and it's a constant battle. It's like something you constantly have to overcome. My really bad cycle I was in was being, and I would say this to people too, when I was dating, I was really attracted to the bad guy. And I would even say, like, up front, I'm aware that I do this. So if I like you, there's probably something wrong with you. But I would always say it jokingly, only to find out that, oh, no, I was right. It wasn't just a joke. I've had, I think I've had 26 broken bones in my life due to bad relationships, and um, just like that, getting in a cycle and thinking, okay, this is the last one. This is the last one. But when you're a child, ooh, I'm getting deep here. When you're
no,
a
you're good.
child,
I love this.
so when you're a child and something breaks your, we'll call it your gut instinct, something like breaks your natural gut instinct and becomes the new familiar, the trauma becomes the common. That is what you're going to be attracted to, even if your brain knows it's wrong. Your body says that's what's familiar, and that's the thing that's really hard to overcome. Is even if you don't do this thing, your body says, but that's familiar, and familiar is safe. We know it's not safe, but your body is saying, like, really battling with you, with your brain. It's what's going to happen. At least this bad thing's going to happen, versus wondering if it's going to happen. So you really have to challenge yourself constantly to repair your natural gut instinct to protect yourself, versus go to what's familiar. I know it sounds so crazy, but it's a long process, and it's definitely not easy to get
No,
over.
and there's something called embracing the suck. And you get to embracing your trauma. It
Mhm.
becomes an identity. It becomes how you function. It's so familiar, even though it's chaos and you got 27 broken bones and things are going bad. It's what, so you know how to navigate it. It's a terrible way to live, but it is what functions. And
Right.
I came out of the darkness too. And mine was from my time in Iraq and other things.
Mm.
That was a Vietnam vet. There was a lot of things that drug addict. There was a lot of things that I went through that I probably should have never seen at my young age when I was
Right.
young, and a lot of trauma. But for me, it was God that pulled me out of it. For everybody is different. For me, it was God and some good psychologists at the VA. Thank them for their help and their tools that I got from them. But how did you pull yourself out of the darkness? And then how do you use that skill when it comes to these people who are in the middle of the darkness?
Yeah, being stuck in the middle is the and that's when you're a child, you don't really have control over it. Or even when you're a teenager, you don't really have control over some of the things that you might need to be doing for yourself. And on the other end of that, you might not have the full brain function to understand that some of the things that are good for you are the thing that is good for you, even if you don't like it. For me, distancing myself from even some of the good people in my life, really like pulling myself out of my situation and not allowing myself to go back to it is probably the best thing I've done for myself. I do live on the other side of the country from my family. There's the closest person to me is a 5-day drive. Like, and I have great family members. I have some sketchy family members and I have some really
We
awesome
all have
ones.
those.
And yeah, yeah. And but for me, my cycle was sometimes allowing myself to be in a bad situation because I would think in my subconscious kind of think somebody will pick up my slack if I can't do it. And so really relying on myself 100% was what worked for me. And I had to do that a couple different times. And every time I left and I would get in a good spot, then I would think, okay, let's go back. And so I can be close to family and they can help me with my kids. And then I would fall right back into the same patterns even though they weren't doing anything. It was just that whole cycle of who they are in my life and who I am in their life that kind of put me back in this place of constantly making myself a victim rather than being a leader and somebody who's overcoming and somebody who's strong and moving forward all the time. I was like in a spiral. So I would leave again and I would get good this was even when I had just 2 children at the time and we were doing so well and then I would say, "Okay, let's go be close to family again." And the whole thing would just come crumbling down. So for me, majorly distancing myself gave me the ability to make the tools I need to get myself good. That's not gonna work for everybody, and like I said, like a child can't just say, "Peace out, parents, I'm
Yeah.
gone." They don't have that option, but if that might be what's good for them, that means we need to sit down and talk with the parents about what are the steps we're gonna take so that your child can manage their life right now, so that you can manage, so you guys aren't headbutting all the time. Because another thing too, if a kid goes through these major traumas, they're grown up a lot quicker than a kid who hasn't had any traumas. And so somebody who's grown up already doesn't want to be parented. They having rules and boundaries and something controlling their life when they've already been out of control this whole time isn't really going to work the same as somebody who has had safety nets the whole time. They depend on those safety nets, so they accept them. Somebody whose safety nets have been broken, they're not going to just let you put safety nets around them. You really have to work towards those again. So, yeah, no, each person's going to be different and really based on what kind of trauma you're experiencing. I'm sure if you have PTSD, you're not just gonna be like, "Hey, let's go do this wild, crazy thing," and maybe it feels fun, but it's not gonna make your brain feel happy about yourself. Might take you back to something that you don't like. And so you really have to find what are your own boundaries and what can you tolerate and what do you need to get rid of or change in order to move forward. I always talk about moving
Mhm.
forward. We
Yeah.
don't move on. We never move on. We move forward. And
Yeah, no, I get that. And I definitely understand that the trauma thing. For me, I learned that you can't chase that adrenaline. There was somewhere, you know how, I thank my beautiful, wonderful wife for helping me through this PTSD journey. She's the one who actually looked up stuff and said, "Hey, you might have this," because I was the bonehead. I'm okay. I'm good. I'm okay. And I wasn't okay. And I wasn't good and
right,
I
right,
couldn't see it and I couldn't see it. I had an inability to see it. But as a psychologist and a doctor, you know that the brain changes, the chemistry changes, the way that the brain fires from the frontal cortex back to your fight or flight. you
Mhm.
skip the frontal cortex and go straight to the let's act and react. And
Right.
those are things that are great in war. They're great in war. They'll keep you alive, but
Right, right.
it's not it doesn't function too well when you get back here. And so that was, I definitely understand the impulsivity, but it took a lot of therapy to get to the point where, I knew that I don't want to chase the adrenaline. It doesn't lead well. But
Right.
I one thing that I've learned about people who've gone through trauma is that if you're on the other end of it, you have shown or learned or somehow acquired resilience. As a doctor and someone who does this, how do you pull someone from being a victim to being a resilient person?
Yeah, that is, you need to become your biggest support when you want to become resilient. You need to understand that not everybody around you is going to baby you and cater you to you. And so you have to become your number one champion, your number one cheerleader. You have to be able to do that for yourself. And then you start building the people around you who are also going to champion for you, who are going to cheer you on through everything and remind you of all the positives that you've done. If you can remind yourself constantly of the goods, even if they're so micro. Today I woke up on time and I was able to, take a deep breath and stretch and feel good about that. Remind yourself that was a good moment. If you, instead of being like, oh, I woke up 5 minutes late, who cares? We're not focusing on the 5 minutes. We're talking about that good stretch you had. That's what we want to focus on. If you could do that, your brain starts just becoming resilient because you start, there's so much I want to teach you right now, but you start actually reframing your neurons to only think about moving on, moving to the next, moving forward to the next positive thing. And if you could do that, then it is so much easier to just forget the bad, move on from the bad, move forward from the bad, and not focus on it. But it's, if you get stuck in that focusing on and beating yourself up, you're never going to be resilient if all you want to do is, I'm not
It's
trying to make fun of anybody, but if you're pity partying yourself or, feel bad for me, or all I ever do is mess up, or even, oh, the whole world hates me, I'm so stupid. I have those moments too. I think we all do. If I think,
yeah.
at some point we all do. And sometimes it is hard to get out of them. I'm not trying to make this like light by any means. It is hard to reframe your brain that way. But if you can not think about those, everybody just says you're resilient. Because why? Because you are, because you have figured out how to get your brain to not think about that bad moment and only think about the good that's happening right now and the good that's about to come. So yeah, really. So I'm going to teach you something right now, really, and I
Go
hope
ahead. I'm
everybody.
listening.
I talk about this a lot, so I have multiple sclerosis. In my journey for trying to figure out my own health things, it lined up with a lot of psychology stuff too. And so for people who don't know, multiple sclerosis is your brain cells die at quicker rates and you get scars on your brain. So your cells are dying all the time, but they're also making new ones. Mine happen to be dying more quickly in some areas and forming a scar. So your brain quits working in certain areas. So one day when I might not know how to blink anymore and I'll have to physically blink it until my brain reroutes itself.
Mm.
So something cool that I learned is, think of your each one of your neurons like a hallway, and you are at one in a hallway carrying a stack of papers, and that is the message that needs to be received. So my message is, I want my finger to flick up. That's the message I'm trying to send, right? So me as the carrier going down the hallway, there's all these windows open and the wind's blowing. I need to do something to stop the wind blowing. The most obvious thing, close the windows, right?
Yeah.
Now a tornado's coming. It's not going to matter that I close the windows. I got to go board up my windows. Okay, now there's also the hurricane coming and extreme weather. So you have to keep layering on things so that those windows don't bust open. That's the same with your neurons. You want to strengthen, it's called the myelin in it. So if you have a neuron that looks like this, it does look like your hand, and it's sending messages through each one of those. Around this is called a myelin. It's like a little tube around it. Those can get really thick and strong. So when you're trying to think positive, if you're thinking negative, you are strengthening the myelin around your negative thought process. So that's going to be the one that your brain automatically wants to go to. That's the strongest one. Let's go the negative route. But if you convince yourself to think neutral, to think positive, all these other things, these ones are going to start becoming the stronger
Yeah.
mylines to deliver messages only through those systems. And pretty soon you can just get rid of this one. This is going to be a weak little nerve ending that your brain's, we don't even need that. And it'll start automatically thinking. So when people talk about doing your affirmations, look in the mirror and do affirmations and you feel like a dork, like, I am strong, I am beautiful, I am powerful. You're actually strengthening those mylines. And eventually that's all your brain will see. You are strong, you are beautiful, you are powerful. That is all your brain will see. So really take those to heart. And some cool things too, that doesn't just go with your like mental capabilities, but your physical capabilities as well. You strengthen the myelin for the thought process on your physical capabilities, and your brain will start sending messages of in proper handwriting. You start practicing proper handwriting, picturing in your brain what
Hmm.
the proper handwriting looks like. Pretty soon your hand will do it better. Even if you never physically use your hand, your brain will think, I know how to do this already, and start doing it more properly. And becoming a better basketball player isn't just about your physical
Hmm.
practicing, mentally practicing as well, shooting, making it over and over. You're going to do so much better. So yeah, I think that's one of the coolest tricks that nobody like actually focuses on, is that how much like the superpower that your own brain has over itself. You want to get good, make your brain tell you, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm doing good. And pretty soon you will be doing good. It's such an easy life hack. It's such a
Yeah.
easy life hack.
And it sounds simple, and that's the things that I've learned throughout this journey with PTSD. Some of the simplest things have the most profound responses. Like
Yeah.
one of them was when I'm going getting out of in the anxiety and it's really messing with me, squeezing on the web of my hand.
Mm,
Okay. Now, just squeezing on the web of my hand for me, it brings me there to what I'm feeling right there,
mm,
and then I could go into that. Like this wonderful lady that helped me, she had me grab a pencil and she said, "Tell me about the pencil." And I looked at her like she was crazy. I said, "Why do you want me to? It's a pencil." And I started describing this thing, and I started going into what the pencil, and it's a number two and it's got an orange thing. And I got to talking about that, and she looks at me after I described that, and she goes, "Were you thinking about your trauma?"
right.
And I was like, oh my God, she did a Miyagi on me. She totally did a Miyagi on me. Wax
Mhm.
on, wax off, bang.
Yep.
So it was a really cool thing. If you could change one thing about how society approaches trauma recovery and community support for it, what would you say towards that?
Yeah, I do think the world is getting a little bit better, but at the same time, you don't want to go too soft. We can't. So I think Gen Z is the perfect example because they are so willing to have a diagnosis and know what they need, but then expect you to cater around that. As where the boomers and such, they don't want to have a diagnosis and you're not going to get any catering or at all. So
Mhm.
we need
Yeah.
to have that middle of knowing what you need and knowing how you yourself can manage to fix it and not just expect everybody else to cater to you. Of course, there's situations where you do need to be catered to, like having a ramp because you're in a wheelchair. Obviously, there's nothing you can do. You can't just
Mhm.
run up the
Yeah.
stairs. There are some things that we do need to cater around for sure. But yeah, I think the way society is moving right now is like at a really good spot. I think where we're understanding that somebody might need certain things, but we need to focus on our how can we adjust our problems so that it's not consuming our life. And I'm afraid that the younger generations are really leaning towards the how are you going to adjust your life to handle my problem rather than how am I going to adjust my problem to handle life. But I think right now we're in a pretty good spot compared to what we used to be and where we potentially
Yeah.
are heading. So
Well,
yeah,
Jen,
I think that focus on what we could be doing, not what others can be doing for us. I think would be a nice kind of thing right now.
Yeah, and that's a me being Gen X, old guy now. I completely understand that you got to do it yourself. I didn't, the people I dealt with growing up, they weren't going to change for you. You weren't, they didn't see it that way. That's a you problem and you need to handle your problems. It was a very different way to grow up, and then how these generations deal with it, all the following generations. It can be very interesting. I can talk to you forever because I love the information that we're putting out, and I just think that out of such an ugly and terrible part, you have changed your life and made it a purposeful life, and that is beautiful. That is a wonderful
Thank you.
thing.
Thank
Now,
you.
before I close out, and then I'll give you the mic because I give my guests the mic always. How did you, has this artistic kind of groove that you've gone into with this filmmaking, have you, how did you integrate those two? Like, how did you come out to this creative part out of all of this ugly? Where did you get to this creative part?
Yeah, so art of any kind is really great therapy for people. And I think part of, for me, it was writing, getting a lot of stories out. So that kind of turned into what more can my stories be? So I do have books out, made films, encouraging my own clients to do their artistic thing. And so you don't have to have a therapist to be doing therapy. So I want everybody to know, if a therapist isn't right for you, don't use one. But art is another great method. Music, I know music's art as well, but music is another great method. Find the therapy that works for you. And I felt like for me personally, getting to, and a lot of people, getting to express their creativity is very therapeutic. So it just seemed like, for like a natural progression. I never thought I'd make money off of my creativity, which it's, so that's nice that's happening. But that was just the path, that feeling like what feels good in my healing journey. And it happened to be being creative and getting my, expressing myself artistically, and people enjoying it and people being curious and wanting to be a part of it. That's why I have my festival, is I'm hoping other people, it gives other people a chance to express themselves in this roundabout therapeutic way, just unleashing your creativity. And I just feel like it flows so well together.
Wow. I tell the people that I have on my show when I do shows like this, very few people get to say that they make humanity better by living out their purpose. And you get to say that. Thank you so much for taking your trauma and taking such an ugliness and making it something that helps people. Even when you don't feel so hot, when you don't really want to do all this, you still help people, you help humanity, and that is a beautiful thing. Thank you for wanting to live a life of purpose after
Yes.
what you've been through.
Thank you. No,
Um,
thank you. Yes.
on my show, I always give my guests the last word. So I'll shut up, give you the mic to speak to the people that watch my
Whew.
show.
I have said so much already, but I think maybe I'll leave with this, that you can do great things if you want to do great things. You just have to trust yourself a little more, and literally the sky's the limit. Just go out there, put your effort towards that thing that you want, and you will achieve it. It's not going to always be easy, but you can get there if you try.
Excellent. Again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I love getting blessed like that by people like you that have gone through some stuff like that and help people. I love being able to tell these stories. They're just so many amazing people doing great things on the down low. They're not getting Beyonce famous. They're not
Right.
getting these big headlines, but they're out there helping humanity. So thank you. Can you stick around real quick after the show?
Yes.
Thank you.